So I thought it'd be good to kind of give an example of how this relates to the Chaska unit. And so we looked at little table that was in there. What we looked is at the different alignments. So this is, everybody can see this. So we've got the yellow up here is the C2 alignment. This is the C2A. And this is the W2. And we're looking at here in block size, that graph or that table that's down there. It shows it in west to east. It kind of shows what kind of, I guess, little islands or bigger islands we're making. We're making islands out of this habitat. But what the difference is in those alignments are the different sizes of blocks of habitat. So for the W2, this ends up being 132 acres. And right here, this is Carver Marsh, and then this is Chaska Lake here, the basins that are in here. So this would be 132 acres, and this would be, the rest of it from this line would be 469 acres. The C2A alignment breaks it up into, it would be 494 acres and 107. And then the C2 alignment on the top basically leaves us 591 acres and a little piece, 10 acre of habitat, which that 10 acres of habitat, pretty much, it's a small area. It's a small area, it's all edge habitat. And so that's why we're looking, if we're looking at the least fragmentation, least route that does fragmentation, it's that C2 route. And we tried to think of an example that would kind of show something that would live there. And a red-shouldered hawk are pretty uncommon. We see them in this area, in the Twin Cities area, but they're pretty uncommon sightings. A red-shouldered hawk has a habitat area of 500 acres. They like over 500 acre blocks of land. And that's all in literature, that's kind of their home area. So that's what we're looking for, is these bigger blocks. And this big area, block of land here, could meet the area for a red-tailed hawk. And this is just kind of this other figure 2 that I had up here. Kind of just shows the edge effect again, and kind of some different shapes. Obviously our habitats are not square, they're not round, they're going to be all different varied shapes. But you can have this little diagram, and this was from some data, a study in Wisconsin. They basically have an area of habitat. It's kind of linear, it's small, little, almost like islands of habitat coming off the end. But this total area is 39 acres. But for species that really like the interior, there might be, say this is grassland habitat, say these would be grassland birds. Since this is all edge habitat and not specific habitat, there's no core habitat here. It's all edge habitat. And the species sensitive to fragmentation, they found that none of these birds were in these areas because it was all edge habitat. But then in something like this was, they said, a total of 47 acres. Here they had a core area or an interior habitat, say that was nice grassland habitat. They did find these sensitive species, six of the 16 species that they consider sensitive were found here. So that bigger block of habitat was really important. They could be in here, they could thrive without having to worry about these predator species coming in and taking over. That's kind of a lot of, were there any questions up till that point? We're kind of going through it fast, but. And then this we kind of added on to that a highway going through, see the C2A route, as a physical obstacle to birds moving through. And we have a lot of, we did a study from 2005 to 2008 that basically looked like the bird use of this area, mainly Chaska Lake, because that's, we were doing a wetland study. We counted birds there every week from ice up to, or when it froze and to when it opened again. And we got For 49 species, and those are just wetland species. Those are everything from your shorebirds to waterfowl, marsh birds, we had osprey, bald eagles. I know they're not on, I did a list, they weren't on there, but we saw eagles very often. So there's a lot of species of waterfowl and other water birds in the area. An area, a highway going through here, this is Chaska Lake. Here's the river. It's kind of taking flight paths away. We also have a moist soil unit right here. This is a moist soil unit that can be really important, some lower water for shorebirds and those species coming through. And kind of can be right in their flight path. And you know, a lot of people say, well, it's a bridge going over it, birds can fly under it. But what we sometimes forget is bridges or roads or whatever, trails, whatever that goes in, it's the habitat underneath it that's compromised, that's degraded. And we found an example of, it was, I'm trying to remember, the white-breasted nuthatch has a habitat area of only 10 acres. And you go, wow, they can survive in 10 acres. But what they can't do, they don't like to cross into other habitats. They'll only span an area of 200 yards to move to another habitat. So if their habitat, their 10 acres are here, then there's another area of habitat here, but there's 200 yards in the middle, they're not going to cross to those other habitats. So that's where these bigger blocks become important, because if you have population of white-breasted nuthatches here, say something happens to them. Now, this is an island. This is one of our island habitats. Something happens to them. They get a disease. There's no males left in the population. They're not going to have anywhere to go because they don't tend to go more than 200 yards to find a new habitat. So they're eventually probably going to disappear. Where if these habitats were more contiguous, within the 200 yards, they can move to this other habitat and then start a new population. So that's kind of why these big blocks of habitat are important. And then I think Charlie brought up at our last meeting, you know, we do have a lot of roads over the refuge. We're in a metro area. But one thing we really noticed under the Highway 169 bridge, just going there often, the road noise, and then the amount of garbage that comes down off of a road. There's one place we walked in with several of my interns, and there'd be road signs and just it's amazing what comes off of a roadway. But large road, the orange signs that we'd have to walk over. Try to think of some other stuff. You go, what are people having in the back of their vehicles? It's all flying off. Tires, garbage, just everything that falls down over it. So we kind of put that as a part that does affect the refuge, not only for us going there, but for the citizens that go there. There are a lot of people, and I saw a figure sometime that a lot of Minnesotans really value wildlife, and to have these green spaces are really important to them. And we really saw that during this study on Chaska Lake. I had an intern that was really into birds. He'd go post these sightings up there that we saw, pectoral sandpiper at Chaska Lake. I didn't think too much of it. I'm like, oh, Bob, that's great you're doing that. You know, that's nice. And then all of a sudden, all these people started showing up. And I'm like, oh, we normally, initially weren't seeing a lot of people there. And all of a sudden, there's these more people were showing up. And going, oh, we came to see the pectoral sandpiper. And it was so nice. They said, this is just really nice that we can see these things in our own backyard. So that's, I think, kind of how it's important to people, that the refuge is important to people, not just to us, not just to wildlife, but I think people really value it, and we really saw that during the study. And it's not that they're just seeing the birds, but they also like to hear them. And I don't think you'll talk to a birder that they're just out there with binoculars, but they're enjoying the whole experience.